Most people look at social media and see opportunity. They see connection, attention, validation, and visibility. They see a place where they can be noticed, where they can be heard, where they can prove to the world that they matter. But empaths see something very different. They see energy. They feel it immediately. They sense what most people miss. Because for an empath, every space carries emotional weight. Every interaction leaves an imprint. Every comment, every reaction, every silent judgment carries a kind of psychological residue that doesn't just disappear when the screen turns off. This is why so many empaths choose not to fully show themselves online. It's not because they have nothing to say. It's not because they lack confidence. And it's certainly not because they don't have something valuable to offer. The truth runs much deeper than that. Empaths understand something that most people never stop to consider. Visibility always comes with energetic exposure. The moment you put yourself out there, you invite people into your space. Not just their attention, but their assumptions, their projections, their envy, their criticism, their unresolved pain. And for most people, that might seem harmless. Just words on a screen, just reactions from strangers. But for an empath, those interactions are rarely surface level. They feel them. They absorb them, even when they try not to. An empath can post something simple, a thought, a picture, a moment from their life, and instantly sense the emotional undercurrent behind the responses. They can feel when someone is genuinely supportive. They can feel when someone is quietly competing. They can feel when a compliment carries hidden resentment, when silence carries judgment, when engagement is driven by curiosity rather than care. That kind of awareness changes everything. Because after a while, the empath begins to understand that not every connection is nourishing. Not every audience is safe. Not every form of visibility is worth the emotional cost. And this is where people often misunderstand them. The world tends to interpret absence as weakness. If someone isn't constantly posting, constantly sharing, constantly updating the world on their every move, people assume they're hiding, that they're insecure, that they're disconnected. But empaths know that restraint is not weakness. It is discernment. They understand that protecting your peace is far more powerful than performing your life for approval. They know that every unnecessary exposure creates an opening for energy they never asked to carry. So instead of seeking attention, they become selective. Instead of broadcasting everything, they preserve what matters. Instead of opening every door, they guard the entrance to their inner world. And that choice is not accidental. It is instinctive. It is psychological intelligence operating at the highest level. Because empaths have learned, often through painful experience, that just because people can access you doesn't mean they deserve to. And once an empath truly understands the cost of unrestricted visibility, they stop confusing being seen with being valued. That's when their silence becomes intentional. That's when their absence becomes protection. That's when they realize that some of the most powerful people in the world are the ones who understand that energy is precious and not everyone deserves access to it. There's something else happening beneath the surface, something most people never stop long enough to question. Social media has trained the world to confuse attention with connection. It has convinced millions of people that being noticed is the same as being understood, that collecting reactions somehow equals building relationships, that the more visible you are, the more valuable you become. But an empath sees through that illusion almost immediately. Because empaths are not wired for shallow exchange. They are built for depth. They're naturally drawn to what is real, what is honest, what carries emotional substance. They don't measure connection by numbers on a screen. They measure it by presence, by sincerity, by the unspoken emotional truth that exists between two people when no performance is necessary. And this is exactly why so many empaths struggle with the entire culture of digital validation. To them, there is something deeply empty about reducing human connection to likes, views, and quick reactions. They understand that 100 people tapping a heart icon does not equal one person truly seeing you. They know that public attention can often be the weakest form of intimacy. That's because empaths crave resonance, not recognition. They would rather sit in one honest conversation that changes something inside them than spend hours collecting surface-level approval from strangers who know nothing about who they really are. They would rather exchange truth in private than perform emotion in public. And this creates a quiet tension between the empath and the digital world. Because modern social platforms are designed around external affirmation. Every feature is built to encourage display. Post this, share that, update everyone. Show them what you're doing. Show them what you've achieved. Show them how happy you are. But for the empath, this often feels unnatural. Not because they have nothing worth sharing, but because they instinctively understand that the most meaningful parts of life lose something when they are packaged for consumption. Think about it. Some experiences are too sacred to perform. Some emotions are too real to turn into content. Some moments carry a depth that cannot survive being filtered through the need for public reaction. Empaths feel this deeply. They understand that once something becomes a performance, it often stops being authentic, and authenticity matters to them more than applause ever could. This is why many empaths choose private connection over public visibility. They may disappear from social platforms for weeks, even months, yet remain deeply connected to the people who matter most. They invest their energy into conversations that have substance, relationships that are built on trust, and moments that exist fully without needing proof. To the outside world, this can seem strange. People often wonder why someone with insight, depth, and emotional intelligence wouldn't want more visibility, why they wouldn't leverage their presence for influence or recognition. But empaths understand a truth that many people spend years trying to learn. Validation that comes from outside can never replace connection that comes from within. And once you truly understand your worth, the need to constantly display yourself begins to fade. You stop asking, "Who noticed?" And you start asking, "Who truly understands?" That is the moment everything changes. Because an empath would rather be deeply known by a few than casually observed by thousands. And that is a kind of richness the digital world can never replicate. There is another reason empaths often keep their distance from social media, and it's one that goes far beyond preference or personality. It comes down to perception. Empaths notice what most people overlook. They pick up on patterns that operate beneath the surface. They sense emotional currents that others move through unconsciously. And because of that heightened awareness, they often recognize something about social media that many people never fully see. It is carefully engineered to influence emotional behavior. Most people interact with these platforms without questioning the psychological mechanics behind them. They scroll, react, compare, consume, and repeat. It becomes automatic. A habit so deeply wired that it feels natural. But to an empath, something often feels off. There's a subtle tension they can't ignore. A feeling that the experience is pulling at their emotions in ways that don't feel organic. And they're right to sense it. These platforms are designed to capture attention by activating emotional triggers. Every notification, every delayed response, every unpredictable burst of engagement is structured to stimulate anticipation and dependency. It plays on the same reward systems that drive other forms of behavioral conditioning. It creates loops of expectation, uncertainty, and emotional reinforcement. And empaths feel these loops intensely. They notice how quickly comparison begins to distort reality. They sense the pressure hidden beneath polished images and carefully curated lives. They feel the emotional exhaustion that comes from constant exposure to everyone else's victories, opinions, struggles, and projections all at once. What might feel like harmless entertainment to others often feels emotionally invasive to them. Because empaths don't just consume content, they absorb atmosphere. They can sense the insecurity hidden behind exaggerated confidence. They can feel the loneliness masked by constant posting. They can detect the silent desperation behind performative happiness. And once you begin seeing these emotional patterns clearly, it becomes impossible to engage with the platform in the same way. This is where many empaths quietly step back, not because they are antisocial, not because they think they're above it, but because they recognize the cost of participating in systems designed to keep people emotionally reactive rather than emotionally grounded. They understand that social media often thrives by amplifying emotional extremes. Outrage spreads faster than peace. Comparison generates more engagement than contentment. Controversy captures attention more effectively than balance. And an empath, by nature, seeks emotional truth, not emotional manipulation. So when they sense these invisible mechanisms at work, they often choose distance as an act of self-awareness. They begin protecting their mental space more intentionally. They become selective about what they consume, what they engage with, and what they allow to shape their emotional state. This is not avoidance. This is discernment. It is the recognition that just because something is normalized does not mean it is healthy. And perhaps this is one of the empath's greatest strengths, their ability to detect manipulation before it becomes control. While others may remain trapped in cycles of validation, comparison, and emotional dependence, The empath often sees machinery behind the curtain, and once they see it, they cannot unsee it. That awareness changes everything. It shifts them from passive participant to conscious observer. It gives them the power to step back, reclaim their attention, and choose where their emotional energy truly belongs. Because the moment an empath recognizes that their focus is being harvested, their emotions being influenced, they become aware of the fact that they are being used as a source of energy for someone else, and their peace being negotiated for engagement. That is the moment they quietly disconnect, choose freedom instead. And this is where the misunderstanding becomes even deeper, because the world has developed a very distorted definition of power. We live in a time where power is often measured by visibility, by followers, by attention, by how often your name appears on someone else's screen. People have been conditioned to believe that if you are not constantly showing yourself, reminding people of your presence, and broadcasting every thought, every success, every movement, then somehow you are fading into irrelevance. But an empath understands something most people never learn. Real power does not need constant evidence. Real power does not beg to be noticed. Real power does not exhaust itself trying to prove it exists. And that is exactly why silence becomes one of the strongest forms of strength an empath can possess. There is something incredibly powerful about being fully present in your own life without feeling the need to announce it to the world. There is strength in moving quietly, in building privately, in growing without the pressure of public observation. Empaths understand this because they have often learned the hard way what happens when they give too much access. They know what it feels like to be misunderstood after being fully open. They know what it feels like to share parts of themselves, only to have those moments misread, diminished, envied, or exploited. They understand that every time you reveal something deeply personal, you hand people information they may not know how to handle responsibly. And over time, this teaches them an important psychological truth. Exposure creates vulnerability, and vulnerability without discernment becomes risk. This is why many empaths begin to embrace silence not as withdrawal, but as strategy. They start realizing that mystery is not about playing games or appearing distant. It is about maintaining ownership of your inner world. It is about recognizing that your thoughts, your progress, your dreams, your healing, and your transformation do not need to be made public in order to be valid. There is an incredible kind of peace that comes when you stop narrating your life for an audience. When you stop seeking confirmation that what you are doing matters. When you stop measuring your growth by how many people acknowledge it. That is when your energy stops leaking outward and begins consolidating inward. And that is where true personal power is built. Empaths often discover that the less they explain themselves, the stronger they become. The less they seek visibility, the more grounded they feel. The less they expose every layer of who they are, the more protected their peace becomes. Because silence does something remarkable. It creates boundaries without confrontation. It protects without hostility. It preserves depth in a world addicted to exposure. And perhaps most importantly, silence forces people to meet the empath without assumptions built from constant access. It removes the illusion that they are fully knowable through a screen. That quiet distance becomes a filter. It reveals who is genuinely interested in connection and who is only interested in convenience. This is why an empath's silence should never be mistaken for absence. Their quietness is often where their greatest evolution is taking place. Their stillness is often where their strength is being refined. And while the world keeps shouting for attention, the empath understands a truth that changes everything. What is truly powerful never has to announce itself. And perhaps the deepest reason of all is this. While much of the world is busy documenting life, the empath is busy living it. This is something many people struggle to understand because we have entered an era where experience is often interrupted by the need to display it. A beautiful moment happens, and the first instinct is to capture it. A personal achievement is reached, and the immediate thought becomes how to present. A meaningful memory is created, and somehow it feels incomplete until it has been posted, shared, and validated by others. But the empath moves differently. They often experience life in a way that is deeply internal. They don't just pass through moments, they absorb them. They feel the texture of an experience, the emotional atmosphere, the subtle meaning hidden beneath what is visible. And because of that, they often understand something that many people miss. The moment you begin performing an experience, you partially step out of it. The need to document can quietly disconnect you from the reality of what is unfolding. The need for reaction can dilute the intimacy of what is real, and empaths sense this immediately. This is why so many of them choose privacy, not because their lives are empty, but because their lives are often too meaningful to reduce into content. While others are posting every milestone, the empath may be sitting quietly in the middle of transformation. They may be healing wounds no one knows about. They may be rebuilding themselves after seasons of loss. They may be learning, growing, evolving, and becoming stronger in ways that cannot be captured in a caption or summarized in a photo. Some of the most profound growth happens in silence. It happens in the private decisions no one applauds, the boundaries set without announcement, the habits built without recognition, the inner battles won without witnesses. Empaths understand this because much of their evolution has happened in invisible spaces. They know what it means to change deeply without needing anyone else to acknowledge it. And this creates a very different relationship with visibility. For many people, visibility becomes proof. If no one sees it, did it happen? If no one reacts, does it matter? If no one validates the moment, was it valuable? But an empath eventually reaches a point where those questions lose all meaning. They begin to understand that some things become more powerful precisely because they are protected from public consumption. Some dreams grow stronger when they are nurtured in private. Some relationships become deeper when they are kept sacred. Some healing becomes more authentic when it unfolds away from outside opinion. This is why empaths often appear absent from the digital world while experiencing some of the richest chapters of their lives. Their silence does not mean stagnation. Their privacy does not mean isolation. Their absence does not mean they have disappeared. In many cases, it means they are finally giving their full attention to what matters most. They are choosing presence over performance, depth over display, meaning over attention. And that is a rare kind of wisdom in a world that constantly demands proof of existence. Because the empath eventually learns one of life's most powerful lessons. The most extraordinary transformations often happen where no one is watching. And that is exactly what makes them real.